Welcome back to Dear Creator. We have Ayu, who is an astrologer and guide for multi-passionate creatives. Thank you so much for being on.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Yeah, I'm so excited to talk because we've connected on social media in programs and things like that. And we never really had the chance to sit down and chat. And we have similarities to our business and, just the different things that we've navigated. But something that's really interesting that I learned about you is that you are carving out your own path and not waiting for opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, where did that start? I feel like that's a really big theme to this conversation that we're going to have.
So, I worked as a magazine editor for 6 years and I was laid off in 2023. It was not expected. It wasn't like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, this is coming. It was like they were actively telling us, we're not going to lay people off. We're going to try to find the funds. And then, boom, laid off. And it was a really vulnerable time in my life because it was literally that happened right after my son turned 1.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I was still in this postpartum phase of my life, still trying to figure out this identity crisis when you become a mother. You're like, okay, who the fuck am I now? And then this job, which I feel like for so many of us can relate, having a job, especially in the US and under capitalism and
Mhm.
the culture that we live in, your job kind of gives you a little bit of that identity, right? And so when that was sort of taken from me, I was like, fuck, what do I do? And, my first instinct was just, okay, well, I'll apply to other jobs. I
Mhm.
was not a green editor. I had 6 years of experience under my belt. I had led the entire digital team, the digital coverage for the magazine. And so I was like, okay, this should be fine. I'll be able to find something else. And rejection after rejection. And I mean, I'm a very sensitive person. And so the
Mhm.
rejections were that was a spiritual experience for me of
Mhm.
okay, I need to get, I don't know, build a tougher skin because this is just, the nature of it. But it was really affecting me. And again, it's just this time in my life where I felt so vulnerable and so sensitive and so unsure of who I was and what my path was because I did enjoy editing and I was good at it, but it wasn't it didn't light me up. It didn't feel
Mhm.
this is my purpose in life is to be a fucking editor.
Mhm.
And so the more rejections I got, the more I kind of started feeling this honestly, this kind of spite grow in me. And I know oh, you shouldn't make decisions out of spite or it's not a quote unquote good emotion or whatever. But honestly, I feel just the truth of who I am is that sometimes I am motivated by spite. And I was like, okay, you know what? If no one's gonna fucking hire me, no one's gonna give me the opportunities that I need in order to feed my fucking family, then I'm going to figure something out on my own. Essentially, how that started was I have always been really into astrology and I had been giving my friends and family little astrology readings for years, but never in a professional capacity. And then
Mhm.
my neighbor reached out and was like, "Hey, your mom told me that you do astrology stuff. Would you do a reading for me? I'll pay you." And I was
Wow.
like, "Oh, what?" That felt weird, because I had never seen this hobby, I guess, as something that I could be paid for. It just felt kind of weird and sticky and very exciting though at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, sure. And I remember walking to her house and I was so nervous on the way over of just what if I say the wrong thing?
Mhm.
What if what I say doesn't resonate? It just, all the insecurities came up for me. And I just remember leaving her house and feeling there was electricity on my skin.
Oh my gosh.
It was the most amazing experience. She's still a client today that I have. And I just was I don't know, I feel it was that moment for me that really hit oh, I can actually do this for a living if I want to, and I can get paid for it. And so from there on, I just sort of slowly started building my skill to be, to read the charts of people because it's
Mhm.
one thing to just be with your friends over cocktails and you're oh my God, yeah, you're just such a Gemini,
I'm a
versus
Cancer moon. Oh yeah,
yeah.
that's so Cancer.
Exactly, exactly. Versus with the client who's paying you, who has very specific questions or,
Yeah.
wanting you to give them specific guidance. So, I just kind of started building up that skill and, reaching out to people in my community, and I would get like all these referrals as well. And so I did put a lot of effort into it, but at the same time, it felt like it was also building organically on its own. To
Mm,
me, I was like, okay, if this is where the flow is, then that's just like where I need to go and what I need to follow. Because there was so much resistance and just like nothing, no energy, no life in the editing realm for me,
mhm.
you know? And so that's how I just like kept pulling at that thread. And I feel like that's kind of how my whole like ethos now as a business owner, it's gonna be my 2-year anniversary in
Oh
like
my
a week. I
gosh.
know, July 3rd, my business is a Cancer sun.
I love
Um,
that.
but yeah, I feel like because my business was born out of that, from that place,
Hmm.
that's just like something that I've taken with me of like, if I am not receiving the opportunities that I want, then like I have the agency and I have the power and the choice to carve my own way where I need to. And the more that I take action on my desires, my dreams, then the more that those opportunities will kind of start to come in front of me.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like it's always, whoa, like I could make money from this like situation. Do you believe like the universe just was like, no, you're not supposed to be an editor. Like you have to go do this now. Like, do you believe in that? The universe guides us in that way?
I think yes and no. It's funny you say that specific language, the universe, too, because I remember venting about my situation to my sister at one point, and she told me, IU, sometimes the universe is really loud and
Mm,
you just have to listen. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like I don't that doesn't what like I don't claim that. Like
mhm,
I'm gonna keep trying this way because this is the way that I think. And I feel like maybe instead of like the universe guiding us, I think there's always going to be places in our lives where we feel the friction and we feel the flow. And I
mhm,
think when we know, for me, I knew deep in my heart that being an editor and like following that path was just like not it. Like there was just so much about that job, that role, that identity that felt like it just like chafed me. But
mhm,
because that was what I had found safety and consistency and security in, my animal brain was like, this is the safe path. This is what I have to pursue. Versus
mhm,
allowing myself to really like dream and like, what do I want? What does I
yeah,
want? What would feel good for me? And like trying to move around the scarcity and the fear and all of the other insecurities that come up around, I mean, as you know, around owning your own business and what is
mhm,
possible for you when you choose this path, you know? So, like, what if I fail? What if people make fun of me and I'm not successful? Da da da. Like, all of that, I think I had to kind of really sit with myself and clear that in order to kind of see, oh, this is where like I'm being pulled and I also feel drawn. You know what I mean? It's like a mutual thing because I'm a big believer
yeah,
that we are co-creators with the universe, with like
mhm,
everything is like a co-creation. And so as much as the universe can like yank me this way, I also can have the agency if I want to go or not, you know? So I think that's how I would kind
yeah.
of put it.
Yeah, I like that because like we do have the choice. We always have a choice. Like I used to always talk to my friends growing up, like we'd have like boyfriends or whatever, and it's like I always like would say like it's a choice to love somebody and like yeah, sure, like you are infatuated with someone or you fall in love with someone, but it's still kind of like a choice if you want to continue loving that person or like being with them and stuff like that. And that kind of for some reason reminded me of relationships as well. But that's really interesting. How is like the first reading then that you did, and how does that compare to the readings you do now?
Well, it's so interesting because now, even just in the short 2 years that I have been in business, like I do something very, very different now than I did
Okay.
back then. So it really, yeah, I mean, really soft pivot vibes.
Love that.
But so the first reading, for my neighbor, she is a little bit older. I think she's in like her late 60s, and her and I always just like had a great relationship, but she's very spiritual and she had never had an astrology reading before, and so she was just like really curious and interested and at a very crossroads point in her life. And I feel like I prepped like crazy. Like I think I took like 3 hours of like looking at her chart, taking notes, like writing it all out because I'm a Virgo. I'm a Virgo sun rising, and I mean the stereotype of Virgo is the perfectionist, right? And I think for me it was this like desire to be prepared and because I didn't know how I was going to be on the spot, you know?
Mhm.
It's so different to write all these notes and to kind of synthesize and whatever, but then when you're with the person and you're in their energy and you're kind of going back and forth and having that dialogue, because for me, readings are so, yeah, it's about responding to the person and it's really like a conversation. Like I'm always here to mirror and reflect back to you. Like I'm never gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm the authority on like your chart. I
Mhm.
know everything about you. Like no, you are that authority, and I'm just here to kind of share what I see that maybe you're not seeing or you haven't connected in certain ways. But the reading itself, it went really well. I mean, initially it's funny, like I think it was kind of a clunky entrance. Like I was kind of
Mhm.
like, like I don't know where to start and saying certain things, and she was just kind of like, yeah, okay. And then kind of once we got the momentum going, then it was like that's I feel like where the magic kind of happened. And I'm even just now talking about this and reflecting back, I'm just really, really proud of myself for doing that because honestly,
Yeah.
that's really fucking scary to me. Like,
Mhm.
especially just thinking of the time of my life that happened where I just felt really unsure of who I was and, new mom, no job, like all these rejections. Like, do I even have anything of value to share? And then to sit with a person and risk, like, yeah, like being wrong about everything or not giving her like what she was kind of wanting from it. Yeah, I feel like that's just very brave. Shout out to IU 2023.
Yeah, she did great. And you're doing great now. You just said that, it's only been a couple years and some things have been changing. What different, like you've had multiple different versions of your business. Like what were those? Or you
So,
started with astrology, right? And then
hmm.
okay.
Yeah, so initially I was doing astrology and tarot. That I love those two together. Like we would do astrology for the bulk of the session and then at the end we would kind of tie in the tarot because I feel like for me, my relationship with tarot, like my cards always read the fuck out of me. And so I think what I love about bringing them into the space is because they're always going to bring in aspects that I didn't talk about yet. Things that maybe seen, unseen forces that are kind of at play in the situation and bringing those to light for us to discuss. And so I love that combo. So I was doing that for, yeah, almost a year, but I think I was getting a little bit, I don't know if frustrated is the right word, just kind of like feeling like it wasn't working for me because there was a point where I felt like I was getting clients where they would come to me and I'd be like, okay, like, what do you want a reading about? And they would just be like, oh, like just life, like whatever. And for me
Mm,
and the way that I am as like a reader and the way that my intuition works, like I respond to what you give me. And that's kind of how my insight gets activated is
yeah.
by responding. And so I was just kind of like, okay, well, I don't really know, like, because I don't think I'm the astrologer who's like, okay, well, this is your sun sign and this is what that means and this is
Hmm.
your rising sign. Like, that just wasn't feeling good to me. Like, I was like, okay, I don't want to
Yeah.
be just like a generalist astrologer. And so I was like, okay, well, I
Hmm.
need to find my niche. But then I also felt so fucking chafed at the idea of like having a niche and finding,
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, but I need to get specific and intentional about what I'm doing because otherwise, if I'm not, I'm just attracting the clients who are like,
Yeah.
oh, just give me a reading about whatever you see or whatever. I don't know.
Hmm.
Because yeah, like I need to be specific so that I can bring in the right people, right? So I had this kind of like moment last summer, or no, I think it was in in the spring where I just was like, okay, how am I gonna narrow this down? And it also coincided with me going through a really intense time like in my personal life.
Hmm.
Just like a lot of really turbulent shit happening for me. And in
Hmm.
order to cope with that, I really, really like devoted myself to my creative practice.
Hmm.
And just, I feel like that period of time for me, it was like, it felt like going into the underworld. And I feel like my creative practice really like held me in that space and also helped bring me out of that as well, or like just feel like I could actually have the capacity to handle all of the stuff that I was going through. And during that process of me really like doubling down on my creative shit, I was like, oh, I need to bring more of this into my work because I've always been a creative, like literally my whole life. And I don't know why it didn't click to me before to like bring that into my work because it's such a fundamental part of who I am. And
Hmm.
so that spring and that summer, I had started kind of reworking my offerings and my business to be more centered on helping creatives do their shit. So I like started working with a writer who was writing a book, and then I started working with a painter for like a show she was putting together, and sort of blending my own creative side, my astrology, my years of editing all into this mix where, yeah, I can be an editor and also I can be, looking at a chart and like, yeah, this is why you're feeling resistance about this because you're fucking
Hmm.
Taurus rising or, whatever.
Yeah.
So blending all those together, and that's really, I feel like that started feeling really, really expansive. And I feel like my business has just been getting more and more precise and just like coming into its own from there.
Yeah, even though it might be like precise or like very like not niche, but like kind of niche to you. I was talking to somebody on Dear Creator today, how we were talking about like it's like not really about niching down, but like creating like a unique niche that is you or your practice or like perspective, experience, whatever. I think it's really normal for people to like almost want to separate those things, like business, creativity,
Hmm.
personal, like all of these different things when you can really like mesh it all together and like build something really unique to you. And I feel like that just aligns you with your people that, you're meant to support or serve and all of those things.
No, 100%. I feel like too, when you start to embrace all of your different dimensions and just like, yeah,
Hmm.
the different interests and different passions and like knowing that they don't have to connect because you are the thread between all of them, I feel
Yeah.
like you're right. It makes you more magnetic because people see you and they see themselves, even if it's not the same hobbies and interests, they're like, oh, but I also have all of these different parts of me
Hmm.
that I want to like integrate more, and not see as like these like siloed different things.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess like you do astrology, but you also support people with their creative practice. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so now what I have sort of done is using astrology specifically as a tool to support your creative self to
Mhm.
because one of the readings that I do is it's called the creative archetype reading, and it's like all focused on the fifth house. And the fifth house
Okay.
in astrology is where you have your creative center. So a lot of the times it's like, oh yeah, the rising sign, the first house is like the most important part of your
Hmm.
chart, but the fifth house is where I focus the whole thing. And so when we look at the fifth house, we can see what sign occupies that place, what the planetary ruler of that sign is in your chart. If you have any planets there, that's going to influence like how your creativity shows up. So, for example, like you have Aries in your fifth house as a Sag rising, and so Aries is a very trailblazing energy. It's very much like a leader energy of like, I am really going to just carve my own fucking path ahead.
Mm.
And I'm actually like, that is actually going to energize me. And I feel like kind of funneling the creativity like through that and through that lens versus like, I don't know, somebody who has like Pisces in the fifth house is like that's a water sign, it's a very, very different. And like to connect with that versus like an Aries fifth house where it's like more about movement and taking imperfect action, versus I don't know, with like Pisces in the fifth might be more like slowing down, alone time,
Mm.
energetic boundaries, maybe even like literally being in the water, like taking a bath. I know a couple Pisces who literally
Mhm.
like love taking baths and like have such good creative downloads in the bath. So yeah, it's like I feel like my role as an astrologer and the work that I do is really about helping people understand how their creativity works so that they can be in a more active relationship with it and from there have more agency in how they're interacting with their creativity, how they're interacting with their creative work, and slowly becoming like their most potent, creatively expressed self. Like I feel like if I were to
Mhm.
put like a mission on like what I do, I want people to be so fucking potently, creatively themselves and expressing that as loudly as possible.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. And I'm definitely going to be like looking up Aries in fifth house because it does feel really like resonant. But sometimes I personally can really hold myself back from like being creative in that way because, for instance, like leadership, like I know I have those qualities and I have that personality, but some days, maybe on an off day, bad day, or a different like season, I definitely second guess myself or feel the imposter syndrome or have fear. And so I imagine like being able to kind of like get that validation or like learn that about yourself in the fifth house or your creativity, it can really like help you ground yourself into that archetype and like you just learn so much about like what you are capable of. Yeah. Do you feel
Yeah.
like there's a lot of people who you work with who have had like these fears or like negative self-talk or negative mindset around it? It's completely shifted after going through that process with you.
Yeah, so I do have a fun little anecdote to share, but before I do, I just want to comment on your reflection on having that Aries fifth house and then also having that sort of imposter syndrome. So in astrology, a lot of the times, especially in like pop astrology, we can like isolate the signs, right? Where it's just like, oh, this is Aries and this is Taurus. But in the way that I read charts is we have the fifth house for you is Aries, and then opposite is Libra in the 11th house. And Aries and
Mm,
Libra are what we call sister signs, and you can never separate them. So astrology is all the signs are always in relationship and conversation with each other, and that's something as you like get deeper into your study and practice that adds, more nuance to it. And something that I have noticed or have, found with working with clients who have that Libra, a prominent Libra Aries axis right there, is that there's this self-trust issue that comes up of like,
mm,
you
that's
know,
me.
yeah. Like really doubting that. And I think with Aries, there can be so much bravado up front of like, yeah,
Hmm.
like I'm, so aggressive and da da da, and I have the energy and I'm excited and there's like this ignition. But then when that energy kind of dies down, then I think that's when the self-trust and the imposter syndrome can come in. And I feel like it's really about working in that kind of sprint and rest cycle for Aries, where it's like I have so
Mm,
much energy. And so it's like taking advantage of that momentum and feeling that confidence through the action that you're taking. And then when it's kind of slowing down a little bit, when you're not feeling as energetic, allowing yourself to kind of pull back, but trusting that like even taking rest or even stepping back, that's still you taking action. It's not you like removing yourself from the equation or,
mm,
not being like the bold leader that you're supposed to be. So I think, very normal. That's that's how you feel. I think it's like common,
yeah.
especially for that placement. But especially you're talking about, other people who kind of feel this way and who have, maybe switched tunes after working with me. I have developed this idea of what I call creative exile,
Mm,
where we at some point, I think this is like a canon event for anybody who considers themselves creative. There's like a point in our lives and maybe multiple points where we do kind of get disconnected from our creative energy. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I actually think that when we go into like that creative exile where we're not creating or what we're creating just feels like fucking shit and is just ugly and not like what we
yeah.
want, or maybe like somebody else externally was like, you shouldn't pursue that because that's not practical or whatever, like cutting off these parts of ourselves. I think there is a lot of magic in the journey of going into creative exile and then resurrecting yourself from that. I think
Mm,
that we really can learn a lot about who we are as through that process and really like get more embodied in like our creative power and gifts through that process. And I will say one of my clients, she had a creative exile canon event where after she quit her job as a lawyer for the city of Seattle to go be like a stay-at-home mom, she was like, she created this room in her house where she was like, this is gonna be my writer's room, and I'm gonna like write this book that
ooh.
I've been dreaming of writing for years. And then her mom came over and was like, what are you doing? You can't be a writer. First of all, you're not even good at writing. And second of all, you have to be a
Oh my
mom. You're
God.
not gonna have time. And she let that really sink in and she did not fucking write. For years, she did not
Oh my
write.
God.
Yeah. And then we got together and we did a creative archetype reading where we kind of walked through her chart and also kind of talked about this moment, this internal block that has just been sitting with her. And then after the reading, she was like, I'm ready to write. I want to
Wow.
commit to this. Yeah, so we've started working with each other, and she actually wrote a whole essay about this idea that Morgan, literally, she has been gestating for 20 fucking years.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I feel, and she's like, yeah, like I just like, I want to be a writer now. And she's like, obviously at a very different time in her life now.
Yeah.
And she's like, I want to do more of this. Like, I want to like bring this into my life. And so I think it's just so powerful to be able to witness that in somebody, because I know how much creative self-expression just like connects us more deeply to ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
I feel
be it,
like
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I feel like us creatives, that is like an extension to our identity in a way. We can talk about how like, we're not our work or like we're not our business, we're not these things. And like I believe that that is true, but I do feel like creatives, they hold on so much value to what they can create and share with people. And even though a lot of artists, I feel like they create to express their emotions or how they view the world. Other people's opinions can get to them or have gotten to people to the point where like they just want to quit. They're like, well, then what's the point of this? But maybe it's really identifying the purpose behind the creation or like how it makes you feel and saying like, fuck anyone who like tells me I can't do something. Like, and it kind of goes back to the autonomy and having a choice. You have a choice to continue doing what you're doing because you absolutely love to do it, or to not just because someone else said that you're not good enough. Or I feel like those types of people always have something going on inside them, and it's not really the person that they're being like, you suck.
Yeah, I think people who say those kinds of things are creatively exiled themselves and they
Mm,
don't have the balls or the guts to like go to that place of like these are my unexpressed gifts that are like screaming to get out. Like something that I say is like if somebody told you not to be a singer because of X, Y, and Z and you cut that part off, like that part of you is still singing. They're still trying to come out. And the more that we repress that and the more that we push that away, and like I feel like there's this thing with creativity where we are just like naturally wired to create. I mean, if you think about our literal physical anatomy, like hello,
mhm.
there is
Yeah.
that. But also I just think like there has never been a time in history where humans weren't creating. Like those fucking bitches were dreaming of the wheel. You know what I mean? Like the
Yes.
innovation is creation. Like sometimes it was by necessity because we need to survive and we
Right.
need to like make these little baskets so that we can go pick our food or whatever. But like now at this point in time, it's like to deny this part of like our innate nature. It just feels like so fucking silly and dumb to me. But at the same time, I think there is this balance between creating to share because I think it is actually really important for creatives to share their work and for their work to be seen. Because I always tell my clients the thing that you're sitting on, the idea that you are not fucking acting on, is the exact thing that somebody else is waiting to read, to experience, to listen to.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I think it's equally as important that as creatives that we create for ourselves, that there are things that we make that never see the light of day, that we're just doing for our own satisfaction because we just like have to bring it out of us. So I feel like it's just,
Yes.
it's really about like finding that balance and the more that you can move through those things because there are people on both sides of the spectrum, right? Where like
Hmm.
people who love to put their work out there and but they get stuck with just making things for themselves because they want the validation. And then there's
Hmm.
people who are like always making things in the shadows and love that, but then don't ever like they feel paralyzed to like share their work, you know? Where do you feel
Yeah.
like you sit? Do you feel like you have like a good balance of those things or?
I do both for sure. I'm more in the spectrum of like wanting to share, but then like I don't share everything. I see my business and like what I do as kind of like a part of everything else that I do. I'm very multi-dimensional or disciplinary in a lot of different like creative
Hmm.
things. When I was in my younger 20s and I literally did everything. I did photography, design, I painted, I did digital illustrations. And like I put my digital illustration into a reproductive what was it? It was like a organization for to get money for like abortion rights and stuff like that. And I remember like we dropped off our prints and then the next day was the show. And I was like nervous to put my print in there because I was like, nobody's gonna want this. And it's not like I was making money off of it. I was just like, wow, there's gonna be a lot of people here. So, but then like the next day, there was like that little sticker on my illustration, like somebody bought it and I sold it for like $30. So like $30 to pro-abortion rights. It was like that push and pull. Like I'm just like a push and pull type of person, which like when you were talking about my astrology, I was like, that is literally me. But how about you? Do you like to, you want to share it, or do you find yourself creating behind the scenes?
I think that I am more of a sharer. And I think this is actually something that I've been thinking about recently is needing to do more creating just for myself because I think it's like, I don't know, it's like always my first instinct of like, oh my God, I made this thing, like I should post about it or I should share it, you
Mm.
know? I mean, I do a lot of writing that never sees the light of day. Like one of my 2026 goals is to post a fanfic on Wattpad.
Ooh.
And I have the fanfic, like I've been writing it all year, but I don't know. I think because that is like such a new realm for me. Like I've consumed obscene amounts of fanfic this year, but like
Mhm.
I've never written any. Like I write essays on Substack and poems and these kinds of things. But to share like a fanfic that's like smutty is like,
Mhm.
oh, that's like a new branch for me. So that feels like more
Yeah.
vulnerable because I'm not as like used to that. Even though like there's so much terrible fucking fanfic out there. And I feel like
Mhm.
that's the nature of fanfic. Like the charm is that it's just like bad. And I know that mine isn't terrible. I mean, hopefully it's not terrible, but yeah, so it's like I feel like I definitely have that push and pull of like sometimes there are things where I'm like, oh my God, I can't like I'm just like chomping at the bit to share this. And then sometimes I'm like,
Mhm.
no.
Yeah. I feel like I hide behind my like visual creative skills versus like my perspective or experience. So like it would be harder for me to like share my opinion or perspective on something, maybe like through a video or like talking out loud and trying to articulate what I want to say. But like I'm so fucking confident when it comes to taking photos or like designing something. Like
Mhm.
that is so interesting to even say out loud, but it's like so true. And one of the reasons why I have the podcast is to like kind of like selfishly just learn and practice talking, articulating, communicating, and asking questions and just sharing my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. Like I wonder if people have a similar thing. And maybe it kind of relates to your writing versus the other things that you do, where it's like it's kind of like new territory almost, or like people don't really know you to be writing in that area.
Yeah, I feel like with you, I just have a question about what you said. Like, when it comes to like expressing yourself and via speaking, is it that you don't want to say something controversial? Is that what scares you, or is that what kind of holds you back? Or is it more just the whole speaking and sharing your mind and expressing that out loud that's more just like uncomfy?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's more so of, I just like always like it's like I don't want to be hated or misunderstood or whatever. And it's like there's probably out I definitely have haters, but it's like when you put it online specifically, I think it's like it's more obvious. Like people can share their opinion too, which is fine. And I think yeah, I think that's where I have struggled with at least like ever since I started creating content and like building my business and stuff like that.
That is so interesting. And the reason that I asked was because, like I said before, you have that Aries fifth house, but it's always in conversation with your Libra 11th house. And Libra does not want to fucking rock the boat. Like, Libra
Mhm.
is like harmony and balance and just like, the opposite of like instigating some shit, right? I think
Yeah.
also Libra is so relational and there is this like emphasis on like wanting and like again with harmony and balance, it's like wanting that in a relational sense. Like I don't want to be somebody who people are like coming for in the comments and that's like very
Hmm.
uncomfortable. And I will say too with Libra, which is just so interesting hearing you talk about this, like Libra is such an aesthetic bitch. Like there's this whole emphasis on like visual art specifically for Libra. And so it's just interesting to hear you talk about that and like literally speaking to like this part of your chart because the 11th house is our community. It's like in a way in a lot of ways it's how we are being perceived and known for our art. So the fifth house is like where we are self-expressing, and the 11th house is like how that expression is being received. And so it makes sense
Wow.
that you're kind of like, I don't want to be seen as like rocking the boat or, this
Yeah.
is my hot take that's pissing people off. Like, I'm just gonna make things look cute and, you know.
I'm honestly like, I have opinions. Like, I
Oh, I'm
definitely
sure. I just
like,
Sag Rising, so you have some probably really fire hot takes.
yeah, I feel like I would get on threads and just like share things, but then I would get like that kind of like hangover afterwards and then delete it because I'm like, "Ah, I don't, I just want everyone to be friends." And so, yeah, I feel like it's interesting though, because like, for instance, like an example, like of we've been talking about like my Aries and Libra and stuff like that. If somebody came to you and was expressing that, like, would you challenge them in a way to kind of rock the boat or maybe like do things in a way that their chart is telling them that they are, but they're like, no, I can't. I'm too scared or I just can't go through with it.
Yeah, so I am definitely of the mind of like, I'm never gonna push you past what you are comfortable with, but even then, I'm like, this is what I'm gonna offer to you, and this is the perspective I'm gonna give you, and I'm gonna also like open this door to this side of you that you're not expressing, but that maybe wants to be expressed. But it also doesn't have to be in a way that you think of like maybe it's not about like popping off these hot takes on threads, but express that part of you in a different way. I think what's interesting too about what you've been saying, so one of my frameworks is the creative archetypes for each sign in the zodiac, and each one of them
Mm,
has three different ones. And so one of the creative archetypes for Aries, which is your fifth house, is the agitator, is the
mm,
person that shakes the table. And because I think when we come back to the truth of creativity, it's about being really honest. And sometimes that honesty and that truth is gonna fucking ruffle some feathers. And honestly, sometimes it needs to so that those bitches can wake the fuck up to their own truth and
yes.
their own shit. So I feel like in that scenario, like I want people to kind of release themselves from the shackles of how is this going to be perceived. I think
Hmm.
that it's always important to name that like we can't just be like, "Oh, well, you shouldn't give a fuck what other people think." Like I think it is healthy to give a fuck what other people think. I think that's like what it means to like be in community with people. I think there's
Hmm.
that dis level of discernment that we need to have though between like I care if I posted something and you came to me and you were like, "Hey, this is kind of fucked up." I would be like, oh shit, this is somebody
Hmm.
I'm in community with and she's saying that to me, so then I would take that seriously versus just like some random ass bitch on the internet who I have no relationship with saying that. I would be like, okay, whatever, like I don't
Hmm.
care. So I think like applying that discernment and something that I do in my work with people is like pushing our creative edges because I think if we have the desire to become like our most potently creative self, it does require us to kind of push the boundary of what we currently are in right now. And even for me, like the idea of posting my smutty fanfic on Wattpad, that's definitely pushing a creative edge for me. But I feel so strongly that I want to do this. It's just, that insecurity and whatever. And I'm not gonna let that insecurity stop me. And I will. I think in the fall I'm gonna do it because that's when it'll be like more fleshed
Yes.
out. But yeah, I feel like, I'm never gonna like be like, you have to go do this like exposure therapy and go on threads and give all your hot
Yeah.
takes and become this like mad woman who's just like on a rampage. But I do think that's like, can we be more in relationship with that part of ourselves? You know, can
Hmm.
you be more in relationship with the part of you who has that fire? You know, you're
Yeah.
Sag rising, you got that Aries fifth house, you have the fucking fire there, like you said. But it's more just like, okay, how, yeah, acknowledging that part of you maybe in ways that it's not feeling acknowledged right now. So,
Yeah, and like the word that came up in my head as you were talking was like acceptance as well. Like
mm,
it's like you want to do something, but something is holding you back. So it's like, what do you need to accept about yourself or the situation or whatever? And like trust too. I feel like on Dear Creator, this r- round of guests, we've been talking a lot about like self-trust and everything like that too. I can imagine that astrology can really help with that. How have you navigated like trusting your path and like because you've carved it out yourself, like how did you trust that it was going to work out?
so I think this is where actually astrology can come in really fucking handy because I have a Scorpio stellium in my chart, which, dear listener, if you don't know what that means that I have three or more planets. A stellium is three or more planets or placements in a specific sign or house. And Scorpio is a sign that is really wired and actually thrives off of deep transformation and facing the unknown very bravely and is always going to catch themselves when they, enter the depths of the cave. Like that is a sign that can really handle jumping off the cliff.
Mm.
And I think what I have noticed too, because that's the thing, like, so I have the Scorpio stellium, but I have a Taurus moon, and my Taurus moon is like, girl, stay safe. Like, we're comfortable here. Why the fuck would you go over there? Like, that's scary.
Hmm.
Why would you leave this cozy bed? You know, like, we're comfy, but we're unfulfilled, and that's okay. And my Scorpio stellium is like, no, like, we need to be fulfilled. We need to, like, taste every fucking thing that we can taste, and it's not going to
Hmm.
be comfortable. And so there is this push and pull within me that I can recognize, like, my own patterns of when I tend to stay safe. And I think for me, I've had to kind of test it a little bit. I've been like, okay, I'm gonna like take this risk and see what happens. And what
Hmm.
I have noticed in my life is that the more that I take emotional risks, the more that I brave the things that I'm scared of, the more that I forge ahead into the unknown, into the fucking abyss, when I
Hmm.
have no idea like what the fucking plan is, the more that I see my life just like become my dream life before my eyes. So it's like every single time that I've done this, because not only am I building self-trust, right? Of like, I can do this hard thing and handle it. I'm not gonna fucking die. But
Hmm.
also really reorienting my relationship around the things that scare me and around my fear. And I don't know that I would have seen that perspective if it hadn't been for like the ability to see my chart and to see kind of how these different things in me are wired. And
Hmm.
yeah, so I think in that sense it does help.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, I wonder if it would be helpful for people to look at their chart if they're going through a pivot or like evolving as, like something's just not fitting anymore, or they're just in a big like reflection phase and just wanting to kind of like revamp or just get a little more, have like a more like wiser presence to like their business because like we all start somewhere. We're like baby business owners, and then we like learn a bunch, and we're like, oh, like I can now like use this and like integrate it into my business or like life in general. So, yeah, where I know, like you said too, like some people they just look at like one sign or like one house or whatever. It's all kind of like this bigger system, though. What are like, how would you like direct people into getting more in tune with their chart, especially if they're in a pivot season?
Mm. Yeah, obviously first and foremost, go see an astrologer because I feel like that's just like,
Yeah, that's probably the best way,
Mm.
honestly.
But I will say if you're like interested in your chart and you are kind of going through a period of change, I think, because there's a lot of different like methods and I don't know, some of them might be a little bit too advanced. Like I want to try to keep it accessible. I feel like the place that I would look at specifically when it comes, because I feel like pivot is, especially like your kind of framework around like the soft pivot. It doesn't have to be this like big transformational, like insane fucking death rebirth kind of vibe. But I
Hmm.
will say for I still think that we do internally kind of it can experience pivots in those ways of like even if it doesn't feel so dramatic, it's still like the death of an old of a thing and then the
Yeah.
birth of a new thing. So for that case, I would recommend people to look at their eighth house and the sign that occupies the eighth house and any planets that live there, because that's going to kind of give you a clue as to how you can best navigate those transitions. Because the eighth house is a lot of things, but one of those things is those deep transformations, those deep personal changes, that kind of death and rebirth. And for example, I have Aries in the eighth house. And so the way that I can handle that in the best way possible is to just keep fucking being relentless, keep taking imperfect action, to just keep charging the path ahead, to be the trailblazer. You know, I feel like Aries has
Hmm.
been such a theme for us, this podcast.
Yes.
And so the more that I lean into that versus like being frozen, not being the authority of my own life, you know, not taking on those Aries qualities, that's when I can start to feel that friction. And so I don't have any planets in Aries. So I don't have any like nuance or complexity there. But I think just starting with the sign there of like, okay, how, you know, how would like Taurus approach this? Like that would be
Hmm.
really like, okay, you need to be like really embodied and really taking care of your physical self, tending to that, and also going at your own pace, not feeling like you have to rush through it, not falling into the scarcity traps, like really, really leaning into the abundance of like you as a fucking human being and your body. And also, I think the creativity piece too, because Taurus is ruled by Venus. So there's that. But I think, you know, I think that's a good place to start of like, okay, I'm diving into this change. You know,
Hmm.
something is gonna die and the me is gonna be reborn, even if it's on like a micro scale. And so I think the eighth house can really be supportive in that sense of like, okay, how can I support myself during this period?
Hmm. Ooh, I love it. I feel like I've learned so much from you. And I could listen to you talk all day. Can we just chat all day?
Oh, no, this has been such a fun combo.
Yay, I'm so glad. Yeah, I think what would be really cool is to just hear like how you pivoted out loud. I feel like that's something that we've talked about off screen and stuff like that. I don't remember if I mentioned it yet in this podcast, but yeah, like what did pivoting out loud look like for you? Like as you've had like these multiple different versions of your business, did you share that process online or do you typically like process your thoughts and reflections like with your community? I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, so I think that it's funny. So I started my Substack in 2021, actually. I've
Oh,
had a
wow.
Substack for a really long time. And the original name of my Substack was TMI, Oversharing on the Internet Energy, because that's just kind of my personality. Like I'm always oversharing online for better and for worse. And so um, I feel like that oversharing piece is just kind of how I've always approached the internet in general. But then also with my business, I feel like the kind of content that I love to see is when people are talking about their own journeys and like being really transparent about like,
Hmm.
yeah, this fucking flopped and that kind of sucks, but this is what I'm doing, you know, whatever.
Hmm.
I love consuming that because I just like really have a fucking chafe around like the overly aestheticized, like my business is perfect and everything is
Hmm.
perfect front, because it's just like to me that's not relatable, that's not human.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I, you know, if I like to see that, then I want to also embody that as well. So I was very upfront about the changes that I was going through, and just the kind of things that I was thinking. And sometimes I would be explicit about it, of just like, I need to take a break this month because of da 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 da. And sometimes I would just express it through my art. Like I make zines and I publish zines on Substack. And so sometimes, you know, if you read the zines, then you could surmise that I was going through some, you know, some shifts. But I think also I remember hiring a like a social media consultant, KP. I don't know if you are Jupiter Content Co. I
Oh,
don't know if you're in
I've
community
heard of
with
them.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hired them. We have like like a friendly relationship. And I told them about the pivot that I wanted to make, you know, between just doing astrology and tarot to doing more like creative work, and how I had already been doing that behind the scenes, but I wasn't
Hmm.
sure exactly how to do it up front. And they were just like, you just kind of do it. And then I don't know why, I don't know why, but when they said that, I was like, oh, and it just, I don't know, everything just clicked. And it was like, obviously, just like the simplest answer. And they didn't even give me like a, okay, and then here's how you do it and whatever. But it
Right.
was just kind of like, sometimes you need to hear from somebody else to have the permission of like, oh, like, I don't have to do it in this curated fucking way. And I think that's another thing I have learned about being a business owner is that I have to really redefine these things for myself. Like, for
Mm.
example, selling. Like, I need to reevaluate my relationship with that, redefine like what does it look like for IU to sell something versus like maybe
Yeah.
my associations of like a sleazy car salesman, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
really like taking that back on my own terms and making it something that I can feel good in, that feels fun to me because that's one of the pillars of my business is like if it's not fucking fun, then I don't want to do it. If my world that I'm creating is not fun and I don't even want to be here, then why would anybody else want to be here, you know?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I've just been very open about that. And I mean, I remember you commented on a reel that I posted where I was like, yeah, I hosted a workshop that nobody came to and like, let's talk about it, you know?
Hmm.
Where it's like those kind of things that of course I feel shame, like, and that was so embarrassing and I had all my fucking feelings about it. But I think at the end of the day, like, I am just such a fan of I mean, just a creative. It's like you take those feelings and you alchemize them into something else. And that reel got so many views and so many fucking people commented on it in our community that were like, oh my God, like this happened to me or whatever. And I just feel like that's the whole point of sharing and using your creativity and spreading it outward is like you become this like beacon and light for people to flock to you and to see themselves in you and to I don't know, just like sharing that human experience. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I feel like it's actually really important and a pillar of mine to be transparent and to share in those ways, to share the process.
Hmm. I love that so much. I feel like community is very important and like it's not just a one way relationship. I think the sometimes when like it seems like someone has it all figured out, it might be like that's only like what they're broadcasting. And though like when you do share the process or the behind the scenes or what you're going through and like humanize your brand and like your presence online or in real life, then it's like you're inviting other people to share their stories or like to comment on like something that they saw themselves in that you shared as well. And like that's like community. That is literally what that's all about and like what the purpose is in my opinion. So I love that. I think that's really cool. Is there anything that you're selling recently that you'd like to shout out before we hop off?
Oh my God, yeah. So I actually just recently opened up enrollment for my group program slash creative playground called Holographic.
Ooh.
And it is a 10-week program where we are going to just turn you into the most potent version, the most potently creative version of yourself. And we're going to do that by experimenting with different mediums. So, one of the things that's really important to me, and one of the things that is like a pillar of my business, is a multimedium experimentation because I think that IU the writer shows up very differently versus IU the collagist, the pianist. Like
Hmm.
those are different parts of me. And so I think when we experiment with different mediums, we are also meeting different parts of ourselves and meeting different parts of our creativity and pushing our creative edges. And so we're going to do different creative workshops. Like we're going to make zines, we're going to write smut, we're going to make oracle cards, we're going to make self-portraits. And then we're also going to have like co-creation time so that you can work on the projects that you really care about that you keep putting on the back burner or not
Hmm.
prioritizing because I think that's another thing that's really important to me is that we're actually doing the work and that we're actually
Yeah.
finishing and getting the ideas out into the world. So that accountability is there. And then the third kind of like architecture of the this program is my astrology expertise. So we're going to have like astrology hot seats where we come in and we're going to just like talk about your chart and different, blocks that you're having or your ideas and your projects and with your chart as like the map, then we're just going to have that live astrology reading together. And I did this in one of my other programs recently and it was just so transformative to even just like listen to the other people's readings, and what's
Yeah.
coming up for other people. So I'm really excited about it. It's going to run from September to November or like the first week of December. And yeah, all the info for that will be in the show notes in the description.
Hmm.
But I'm so excited about it. And I've been working on building this program all year. And there's already like 3 or 4 people in it. And I'm just like,
Oh my
like,
gosh, that's
yeah, it's just so
exciting.
exciting. Yeah.
That is so cool. I love the name too.
Yes, holographic, it's like, again, like becoming your most potent self because you are fully expressing each of your dimensions, right? Like a
Hmm.
hologram is this fully expressed 3-dimensional rendering. And so it's like, okay, holographic as in like expressing all of these parts of myself, as in like being able to kind of see myself from different angles and letting the light hit me in different ways and allowing myself to be whole while also showing up whatever ways that I want to in this moment and just like
Yeah.
really leaning into the multidimensionality of yourself that you're like coming off the fucking page. So
Oh my gosh. You literally are so good at just explaining and expressing like your expertise, your creativity. Like I'm just like, don't leave. But
thank you for saying that because that's something that I have had a little bit of an insecurity about and something I always get nervous about, like getting on podcasts. I'm like, am I gonna say this right? Like, am
oh
I
no,
gonna
this
trip
is
over my
your
words?
platform. This is the like format that I think works really well for you. I mean, I love your Instagrams too. Like they're so funny. You're so silly. I love it. But yeah, I appreciate you so much for spending time with me on Dear Creator, sharing all things astrology, creativity, your pivot story, like literally everything. I think it's so cool that you carved your own path and like you didn't wait for opportunities. Like you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna do this then and I'm gonna make it work. And I think that's really cool and inspiring. So I appreciate you being on Dear Creator. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a fun conversation.